Hi everyone, this is Hippy Dippy. Now I have my phone up here. I have the Stanley Cup playoff brackets just so I can name all the teams because I keep forgetting a couple of them. But here's the deal: we're gonna go by each level and their history of each team. So we're gonna start off with the Seattle Kraken versus the Dallas Stars. The Seattle Kraken have only been in the league for 2 years. They made the play. They missed the playoffs the first year, then they won the playoffs the second year. So I think that's really good. They beat down the Colorado Avalanche in 7, which is a grueling thing, especially when the Seattle Kraken don't have any star players. There's just a wonderman and journeyman. But I hope that they make it far. And they're bright. Their future is bright when it comes to the team. Okay, I hope they succeed because I like the Seattle Kraken. They're like my fifth favorite team. So when it comes to the Dallas Stars, however, the Dallas Stars have, how do I say it? The Dallas Stars have not won the Stanley Cup since 1999, pretty much, so to speak. They've made the Stanley Cup 4 other times, but they lost it all. They lost all 4 times. The only time they won it was 1999. The Dallas Stars, however, is that the last time they made the Stanley Cup, they lost to Tampa Bay in 2020. So they haven't really been irrelevant that much. I mean, they have been irrelevant recently, like in 2020, but that was you know. But I'm rooting for Dallas because of the fact that they deserve another cup, Stanley Cup finals. But the problem is, though, I have a fearing that if they make the Stanley Cup finals, they're gonna lose it again, like they always do, because they're like 1 for 5 for Pete's sakes. They've won one Stanley Cup out of 5 tries. That's not good. That's like shooting a 3 pointer and you went 1 for 5. That's below fucking 25. That's below 25% for Pete's sakes. So that's the main gist of it. I got the Seattle Kraken in 6 in this series. I think that they have momentum, especially when they knocked off the Stanley Cup champions from last year. Which, by the way, Colorado, I understand that you're upset. But to be honest with you, you're the only team that has not lost in the Stanley Cup Finals yet, which is kind of shocking. And also Seattle Kraken, but they haven't made it to the Stanley Cup Finals, because the Colorado Avalanche have won the Stanley Cup, in '96, 2001, and 2022. And those are the only 3 times they made it to the Stanley Cup Finals, and they haven't lost. So I think that the Colorado Avalanche are good. As for the Minnesota Wild, well, you're the team that gets the punching bag. You can never make it out of the first round like you always do because you suck. Um, I feel bad for Minnesota Wild fans, man. They can make it to the playoffs and then they just get curve stomped every single year that they make it in there. Even if they're a good team, it's like they're just like the NHL's fucking punching bag, for Pete's sakes. They haven't really done that much either. They haven't made it to the Stanley Cup Finals in their whole entire career, which is kind of funny. Now, as for the Vegas Golden Knights beat the Winnipeg Jets, which the Winnipeg Jets are also the Western Conference's punching bag, besides the Minnesota Wild, because they always make the playoffs and they always get eliminated in the first round. However, I think there was one year that the Winnipeg Jets have made it to the Western Conference Finals, but then they lose because that's what they do. Because they don't know what the hell they're doing. As for the Vegas Golden Knights, they have made the Stanley Cup once, and they lost to the Washington Capitals in 2018. Their section is really interesting and really unique. As for the LA Kings, last time they won in the Stanley Cup was in the mid 2010s, I believe. I think the last time they won is 2014 or 15. I forget which. Because I know in the mid 2010s it went when the 2011 when Boston won, it went Chicago Kings, Chicago. So I think that's where it goes. So Kings won 2 Stanley Cups in that time span. But yeah, that's the main gist of it. But they will be back. I think they're just retooling because I didn't expect the LA Kings to make the playoffs to begin with because they were bad last year. So yeah, that's beside the point. As for the Edmonton Oilers, they haven't won the Stanley Cup since 1988, which is pretty long to be honest with you. That was the last time they won the Stanley Cup and the last time they were irrelevant in the Western Conference. The Western Conference has gotten two more teams in the Seattle Kraken and the Vegas Golden Knights, and the Vegas Golden Knights are versing the Edmonton Oilers. This series is probably going to go 7, to my opinion. I think that the Vegas Golden Knights are going to win. But that's just my opinion because they've always had a deep playoff run every single year. I mean, seriously, like the Vegas Golden Knights, and the fact that they are not trash talking like they did a couple years ago, I believe. So yeah, the Vegas Golden Knights are going to the Eastern Conference Finals against the Seattle Kraken, which is gonna be interesting because it's two expansion teams, the two newest expansion teams that make it into Western Conference. That'll be fucking hilarious. Okay. Now then, the Boston Bruins. Boston Bruins lost in 7 against the Florida Panthers. I'm a Boston Bruins fan, and I like to say this: the Boston Bruins, since 2011, have choked every single goddamn year. They made the Stanley Cup Finals twice, and they both got beaten by the Chicago Blackhawks in 2013, I believe, and then they got beat by the St. Louis Blues in 2019. So the Bruins have always been a good team, but for some reason they can never win it all because they think they're all high and mighty. And to prove my point that you can never trust Boston in the play. And this is the funny thing because Boston was had the most seasons, had the most points, but you can never trust Boston in the playoffs. Why? Because they have the most the Stanley Cup Finals appearances, but they've lost the most out of every team in the league. So they're not really good. Most of that's due to the fact that there were only 6 teams and they always got beat by Montreal. But that's beside the point. So that's why I never trusted the Boston Bruins even when they won the President's Trophy winner. Which, by the way, there is a curse because the Florida Panthers won last year and they didn't make it to the Stanley Cup. And which is kind of ironic since the Florida Panthers made the Stanley Cup only once in their lifetime. The only time that the Florida Panthers went to the Stanley Cup final was in '96, and they got swept by the Colorado Avalanche. That's why its circle comes around. They haven't been really irrelevant since then, but at least they're not the Atlanta Thrashers who suck ass with that deranged fucking thing. At least they made it to the Stanley Cup Finals at least once. That's all that matters. Okay, they made it to the Stanley Cup Finals once. Will they win it this year? I don't know. Who's to say? Because they're going up against Toronto Maple Leafs, which I am thank you, because my cousin, I know some of my family members are Tampa Bay Lightning fan, and I was getting sick and tired of Tampa Bay make it to the Stanley Cup Finals. They made it 3 years in a row. They beat Dallas the first year. They beat Montreal the second year. No, wait. I think they beat... I don't know. Yeah, they beat Montreal the second year, and then they lost to the Colorado Avalanche the third year. So I'm glad that they beat the Tampa Bay Lightning, because I don't like Tampa Bay at this point. Fun fact: Tampa Bay won the Stanley Cup in the mid 2000s as well. I think it was in 2004, I believe, or somewhere in that range, before the lockout. But yeah, Tampa Bay has at least one more cup in their existence, and they have lost in the Stanley Cup Finals. But for some reason, Tampa Bay has been a better team since 2000, other than the Florida Panthers, because the Florida Panthers are they're both in the same state, and that's the main gist of things. Florida Panthers have not done jack shit in the playoffs. As for Tampa Bay, they've actually done stuff. So I'm not too concerned about the Tampa Bay Lightning. They're gonna be back next year like they always do, because they're a good team. As for the Toronto Maple Leafs, they haven't won the Stanley Cup since 1947. Sorry, I got them mixed up there. I hope that they go to the Stanley Cup Finals because I'm rooting for you guys. You guys have suffered enough. And the fact that I think you've only won like 11 or 9 Stanley Cups, I believe, in your team existence. I'm not too sure about that. Anyone in the comments that's Toronto Maple Leafs fans, I'm rooting for you. I hope you win the Stanley Cup this year because I want you guys to succeed. And this is coming from a Boston Bruins fan. Because at least your team does not choke a 3-1 series lead like the Boston Bruins did this year. So I'm rooting for you guys. You guys deserve it. And the fact that I feel kind of bad because we kind of kicked your ass 2 years in a row in 2013 and 2014, eliminated you in the playoffs. I do apologize. But I'm rooting for you. I hope you guys succeed because you guys deserve to be happy. And for the last one's more interesting because the Carolina Hurricanes versus the New Jersey Devils. New Jersey Devils have made the Stanley Cup. They've won the Stanley Cup 3 times. One in the 90s. I forget which year it was. I think it was in 97 or 98. And then they've won one in 2000. They won one in 98. They won one in 2000. They won one in 2002 or 2003. I forget which. But they've won 3 Stanley Cups because of Martin Brodeur is one of the best goalies of all time. He's only played for 2 teams, the New Jersey Devils and the St. Louis Blues this last year. But yeah, that's beside the point. Because he wasn't relevant in the St. Louis Blues, but whatever. So when it comes to New Jersey Devils, they haven't really been irrelevant since the early 2000s and the late 90s. However, they have had good teams in the past. Since then, I think they made the Eastern Conference Final a couple of times, and I think they made it to the Stanley Cup Finals at least once during that time span. I'm not too sure, but I think they did, and they lost to Chicago or the LA Kings, I believe, in the early 2010s, I believe. I'm not too sure about that. New Jersey Devil fans, tell me in the comment section down below. As for the Carolina Hurricanes, they've always had good teams. They've always made the playoffs. The problem with the Carolina Hurricanes, though, is the fact that they've only won one Stanley Cup, and they lost it. No, they won it. Sorry. They're the only team that they have the same resume as the Dallas Stars that have only won one Stanley Cup. They made it to a couple more Stanley Cups, but they lost. They've only won one, and that was in the mid-2000s. I think it was in 2007 or 8. 2007, because 2008 and 2009 was the Detroit Red Wings, I believe. And then 2010 was the Pittsburgh Penguins or something like that. I don't know. I'm getting off topic. But the New Jersey Devils haven't really been that much damage to the... They haven't made it to the Stanley Cup Finals since the mid-2010s or the early 2010s or something like that. And they lost to the LA Kings or the Chicago Blackhawks because those are the only 2 teams that they versed against. I know Flyers fans got beaten by the Chicago Blackhawks one year. So, yeah. But as for the Eastern Conference, I've got Toronto going to the Eastern Conference Final against... I'm probably going to go with New Jersey Devils. I think that the Toronto Maple Leafs are going to win it in 6, and the New Jersey Devils are going to win it in 5. I just don't trust the Carolina Hurricanes at this point. I mean, they haven't been really irrelevant, and at least New Jersey has built themselves a good thing. However, I could be wrong. I mean, I thought Colorado was going to win their series by sweeping the frick out of the Seattle Kraken. But they decided to get beat down in 7, which is kind of fucking funny. What are you guys' thoughts on the NHL playoffs? This is why chaos is always in the NHL playoffs. Because unlike the NBA, you don't know who's going to win who's going to make it to the Stanley Cup Final, because Boston was the heavy on favorite because they had the most points and the most wins. They got eliminated in the first round, so explain that to me, jackass. But who do I think is going to win it in the Eastern and Western? Well, that's beside your point. So, the last time each team has won the Stanley Cup, Krakens have never made it to the Stanley Cup Final. The Vegas Golden Knights have made it in 2018. The Edmonton Oilers have won. The last time they won it was in 1988. Dallas Stars have won in 1999. Florida Panthers have made it to the Stanley Cup Finals once in 96. Toronto Maple Leafs, the last time they won it was in 1947, I believe. I'm not too sure about that. Because I'm going off this on top of my head. If any Toronto Maple Leafs fans say I'm wrong, that's fine. I'm just going off the top of my head. I do apologize. And the New Jersey Devils, last time they won the Stanley Cup was in 2002. I believe, or 2003. I forget which. And the Carolina Hurricanes won in 2007. So yeah, so that's what my gist of things. Because if Carolina Hurricanes won in 2007, that means Tampa Bay won in 2004. So I hope you guys enjoy this history lesson. That's who I got in the Eastern and Western Conference Finals. I've got Vegas versus the Kraken because I don't like Dallas. And then Eastern, I've got the Toronto Maple Leafs. I keep saying Tampa Bay. Toronto Maple Leafs versus New Jersey Devils. What do you guys think about this year's NHL playoffs? Because it's more crazy in continuity. I mean, out of 8 teams, the only team that's actually made the Stanley Cup Finals the last 3 years was the Dallas Stars. Every other team hasn't even made it that far. That is scary as hell. Like, what the fuck? Later, guys. Stay positive.